Listen up, presented by Dempsey's in Sportsland, alongside my co-host Ryan Renner. I'm Phil Becerra, and boy, oh boy, it's Victory Saturday, Ryan. Victory Saturday as the UConn Huskies, the women's basketball, comes away with a 71-61 win against UCLA. Again, UConn moves to 6-2, 1-0 in the conference. Man, I'll tell you what, high in rebounds in this game. Drew High's 16, high in assists was Westbrook at 7. And then Westbrook led all scorers for UConn with 17. You get right on down into it, Ryan. I think that this was huge for the UConn Huskies because it built momentum, it built confidence. And again, you get a long break. Now, whether the break is good or bad, sometimes it's good for various different sports teams. Other times is bad for various different sports teams. But again, I think it's good in the sense that they get to gather themselves after a big victory. No time to slow down. That's what REM has to keep preaching to these girls. But again, we went over it, and we'll go over it again later in this episode. They don't play another game until Louisville. And again, you have to imagine they travel to play, or actually, I'm sorry, they play in Stores against Louisville. And you got to imagine they need this much needed week off because Louisville is ranked number 7, Ryan, number 7 in the nation.
Yeah, and I think Louisville could even be ranked higher. They're such a good team. And we saw what happened when UConn played South Carolina. We've gone over that many times before. But this game here against UCLA, I totally agree with you. This was a huge game for for UConn to beat UCLA after that huge loss, or not a huge loss, but a disappointing loss, I'd say, to Georgia Tech the other day. But the two players that stood out to me for UConn in this game, you mentioned one of them, Avina Westbrook, in the first half. When UCLA, they had the lead much of this game. They went on a couple runs there. They had 6-8 point leads, and Westbrook, she made a couple of shots. She crashed the boards, and she got rebounds that kept UConn in the game. And she kept the Bruins lead at a manageable score. And the second player that comes to mind for me is Dorka Juhas. She had 16 points, 16 rebounds. Huge game for her. Finally found her rhythm, it seems like, with this Huskies team. Of course, transferred from Ohio State. Big pickup for this team. Now, especially with all the injuries, she's in the starting lineup while Paige Beckers has been out. But she found her spots on the floor this evening, and she felt comfortable shooting the ball. Her teammates gave her opportunities, and she delivered it. And she was 5 for 5 from the field, and she made her only 3-point attempt. So this was a huge game for UConn, a huge bounce back game. But like you said, I think it's a huge, positive for this UConn team that they get this week of rest before they face a very good Louisville team.
Yeah, let's go ahead and go over I wanted to tell you this before before we actually get into the box score and the actual game. This game was part of the Never Forget Tribute Classic at the Prudential Center in Newark, raising money for the 9/11 related charity. And listen to this. I'm reading straight from I'm getting this from Fox News, so credit Fox News for this. It's the first season women's teams competed in the event. The UCLA UConn matchup was nationally televised on ABC, Ryan, becoming the first regular season collegiate women's basketball game to ever air on the network. That was pretty neat because I never knew ABC hardly ever air college basketball games, and as far as men or women. So that was something pretty special for Ariema and company for national televised game. And again, I think that when you talk about that confidence building up, make no mistake, whether you're talking about NFL, again, we're on the topic of women's college basketball, make no mistake, people sit back and think, yeah, I mean, every game's important, but believe me, your team, your coaches, everyone knows, and I had this discussion with you before, it's not a secret. They know when the whole country's watching.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, this is huge. Yeah, that's huge stat that you brought up because even the March Madness games aren't televised, nationally on TV. So that's huge. as well to get that recognition. And Coach Gino had them ready for this game. They're used to the spotlight. They're used to, having all eyes on them. They went on that huge winning streak of 100+ games. That was just incredible back before we started covering this team heavily on this podcast. But, they're such rich in history. And Coach Gino has really done a good job with this team throughout the years, just really building a dynasty in women's college basketball.
Talk just a little bit about San Jose State was the last opponent that UCLA played before this matchup. It was Sunday, December 5th. And then they had to come in and face Connecticut. Number 3 Connecticut minus Paige Beckers, right? But, UCLA rolled all over. They had a huge performance, and I know you'll talk about her in a second. They had a huge performance from their star player, but UCLA rolled to a 112-33 victory over San Jose State. We're not going to get too much into San Jose State and that team, but when you look at a team that put up 112 points, that's even more than what you see sometimes out of WNBA games, all right? So my eyes, they popped really, because when I looked at the numbers that they were putting up, I'm like, Ryan, obviously they gave Connecticut a scare, and you could talk about that because you witnessed it and you texted me right there at the end of the game, and you said, Phil, they're only down by like 5. And you're like, if they come back, I don't know what I'm going to do. But just talk a little bit about how great Connecticut played under pressure. Usually they don't get tested. Let's face that right now. Connecticut is a team. I heard from a guy earlier today. They're like, I was sitting in the room with him. He's like, usually it's Connecticut and then everybody else. That's just the way it's always been. So we're kind of adapting to a different kind of Connecticut team all of a sudden, something that at least you or I in our generations has never seen before, because so many legendary players have went through stores like we talked about. And again, UCLA putting up 112 points. I'm like, oh, Ryan, I said that this might be over before it even starts. Phil, you got to remember, this is Connecticut, okay? Minus Paige Beckers. I know that's a big deal because we just had the last episode when I was on the road the other night. But again, you have to have more faith. And I'm the first to speak. I'm guilty of this. You have to have more faith in the coaches, how long they've been around, the legendary players that they've coached that went on into the WNBA. And you have to have faith in the players that are on the floor. I told you, any one of these women are capable at stepping up and putting the team on their back. I strongly believe that, even without Paige Beckers on the floor. And that's what they did today.
Yeah, and 112 points. That's even more than some NBA teams score some nights. That's just incredible. I saw that just before we went on. The UCLA scored that many. But yeah, I didn't watch the whole game. When I got home, it was in the fourth quarter, and when I turned it on, UConn was up 14 with 120 left in the game. And I texted you, and I'm like, well, UConn won the game. They're going to close it out. And then all of a sudden, UCLA, they started to play the foul game, and they fouled UConn every time they got the ball inbounded to get as many possessions as they could. And it was for sure the right call, because UConn couldn't make any free throws, and free throws are so overlooked in basketball. They're so important. Coming down the closing of the game. This proves it right here. UConn couldn't make any free throws, and UCLA went on a 10-0 run in 39 seconds. They cut the lead to 4 points, and then finally UConn was able to get a couple stops after a couple timeouts. Coach Gino kind of settled them down a little bit. They got a couple stops on defense, and the final ended up being 71-61, like we already said. But this was, a game that shouldn't have been as close as it came. It was a 4-point game, just that quick. So it's a little bit of concern. You're right, going down later in the season, especially going into March Madness when there's so much more pressure. But hopefully this team will be more healthy by then. But you just can't let that kind of stuff happen later in the season.
Yeah, you're right. And Now, mind you, if you remember, you had a question for me. You asked me back when we had the episode. I was on the road this past week. Phil, who do you think steps up the most and puts a team on their back? I believe one of my first names that came out of my mouth was Dorka Juhas, the transfer from where?
Ohio State, yeah.
And that was one of the first names that came out of my mouth. She led all scorers until Avina Westbrook. I didn't have the chance to get an opportunity to watch the game, but you did. I guess Avina Westbrook took over right there at the end because she actually led the team with 17 points. But again, I thought it may have been Dorka today because she was right behind Westbrook and she had 16 points. So we talked about how big the transfer Dorka would be for UConn. She played 29 minutes in today's game. She had 16 rebounds. She's a rebound machine. And, that's what I love about her because it's we talked to Michaela Daniels, remember, in the interview, and she said it over and over. She made sure that she pointed out the fact that, and she emphasized to you and I, it's Phil and Rye, it's not all about in the points column, It's a
Yeah.
lot to do. I mean, how about the defense? You have to remember the defense. Some of the numbers, some of the playing time on the court, some of them statistics never show up in the box score. But I tell you what, Dorka, you look at the rebound, 16 rebounds, Ryan.
Yeah, and I mean offensive rebounds, defensive rebounds, turnovers, steals, second chance points, even and fast break points. I mean, there's so many things in basketball. But after the game, the post interview, I wanted to talk about this a little bit.
Yeah.
Coach Gino got interviewed right after the game on the court, and he talked about the pace in which UConn played at. And he said in the first half they were playing so fast that the team didn't see the things that were happening in front of them. And he continued to say in the second half, coming out of the locker room in the third quarter, he thought they played much slower and they were able to see what was happening in front of them and able to make the right decisions.
Yeah.
Because they were down heading into halftime, and that's huge for them to make the adjustments at half, come out of the locker room, and play much slower, not too slow to where the defense can you jump all over you, but make those just slight adjustments to be able to counter what the other team is bringing at you. And like we already said, this is a huge win. Good adjustments by Coach Gino. And Dorka, that's huge from her, stepping up into the starting role all of a sudden. And
Mm-hmm.
she's really the main reason why the Huskies won this game.
And make no mistake, UConn did an incredible job at shutting down UCLA's Lamari Thomas. She went off, the forward for UCLA. She went off against their last opponent. She had I believe, don't hold me to it. I think she had a career high in points. I mean, she scored. She was a scoring machine in that last game for UCLA. I think it was the last game I was reading. But again, Thomas only had 10 points today, right? 10 points. It was Charisma Osborne for UCLA that stepped up with 26. So again, it's not the fact that, okay, you say UConn just did lights out, incredible job. No, but they took arguably the biggest scorer on this team, Thomas, that leads this team. They took her out of the game and they forced someone else to step up, and give credit to Osborne. She scored 26 points, but obviously it just wasn't enough. And like you mentioned, they tried to score late and often, but the comeback fell short by 10 points, 71-61. Again, the Bruins dropped to 5-3 on the year, and the Huskies at 6-2. Ryan, the women's college rankings, like we always do after every episode. Um, I don't know, with this win again is big, very big. Because not UCLA, UConn. I was saying UConn, they avoided the first 2-game skid. I think that this is absolutely phenomenal. Like, I don't even know how to wrap your mind around this. This is how dominant, for people who don't pay attention to these ladies in Stores, Connecticut. UConn women, if they were to lose today against UCLA, Ryan, that would have been the first time since 1993.
Yeah.
1993 that they would have lost back-to-back games. It's absolutely, and no, I wasn't even born back then. So it's, I mean, wrap your mind around it. They have not lost two in a row since 93.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, it's just incredible the dynasty that they've built. But yeah, I mean the AP poll, I love these rankings, right? South Carolina #1, a big game tomorrow against #8 Maryland. Tomorrow be Sunday, so that's a big game that could shake the rankings up. But we would all expect South Carolina to take care of Maryland, but that could be a close game. The Lady Terps have some fight in them. Pretty good team. I think NC State will stay at #2. I think we could see 5th ranked Baylor, 6th ranked Arizona jump up to the 3 and 4 spots. I think UConn might fall down to maybe even 6 or 7 below Louisville. If South Carolina defeats Maryland, I think we'll see the Lady Terps fall outside the top 10. Tennessee, Indiana, I think they'll go up a spot, and I think Texas enters the top 10. But I'm interested to see where UConn how much they fall after losing to Georgia Tech. Huge win here today, but losing that game and then factoring in the injuries, I'm not sure where they'll land in these rankings.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. It's. I can't wait to see, for the new week and the new polls, and the rankings, how they turn out. I just wanted to ask you, very quickly. You know how some of these athletes they suffer from these injuries, torn ACL, torn whatever it may be. Is there any chance, slight chance that Paige Beckers may recover quicker and come back quicker than we think? The only reason why I bring that up because again, I think we're expecting Azzy Fudd, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we're expecting her, another star player for UConn, and they're going to need her, especially down the stretch. So you can see how it's a very good sign for Gino because they're starting to heat up now, right? And it seems like that, again, it's early and we don't really know just because, they lost one, but then they bounced back and won one without Paige on the floor and Azzy Fudd. It's going to be curious to see if they can continue the streak and be dominant like they usually would be. Again, even if it comes down to close ball games, I think that's actually better for this team because you know how they're it's a usual performance all the time. You turn the TV on and here you have UConn. They're running away. The game is usually over with the UConn Lady Huskies. Game is usually over late second quarter,
Right.
halftime. Would you agree?
Yeah. Yeah.
So my point, Ryan, if you're battle testing these UConn Huskies early in the season, just think what that does to them when they play these closer games that they're not used to being in. Teams that give them a harder fight coming down the stretch of the schedule. What will that do for UConn? I think it's going to be huge if they really do punch their ticket to March Madness, which I 100% expect them to, because look who they get back. Azzy Fudd, they may get Paige Beckers back just in time. And when you had them two going up against the top teams in the nation, you've already battle tested the girls behind you, behind Fudd and behind Beckers. You're battle tested already. You know how to survive in them close games. So I don't know if you gave that a thought or not, but right now, as long as they keep coming away with W's, I wouldn't be too concerned. And this is for anybody watching this as a fan of UConn. I would not be too concerned about that score at all, as long as UConn keeps finding a way to win.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. I think it's definitely an advantage because, if you're blowing every team out by 30 or 40 points, when you get to March Madness, that's just not going to happen every single game. You can't
Yep.
expect to
Yep.
blow out teams every single game, no matter, the caliber of team you're playing. So I think it's definitely an advantage, seeing UConn play in these closer games against, no matter who they're playing, but to be ready to fight down the stretch in these closer games, and they already have the experience. You talk about all these new players that they're getting over the off season. I think they're still trying to build some chemistry together. Expect this team to be fully ready. We were talking about getting everybody back later down in the season, but a little bit more on Paige. I saw from ESPN today she may be out longer than we expected because she is contemplating whether to get knee surgery
I knew it.
to
Yeah,
repair
knee
a
surgery. Yeah.
tibial plateau fracture in her knee. So that's definitely not great news at all. But I think it's up in the air now. We first heard 6 to 8 weeks for Paige Beckers, but it's really hard to tell whether she'll be back now for this season.
Yeah, and it's really a coin toss then, because if she does opt out of the season, go and decide to get the surgery done, then yeah, that's really a coin toss. It's like roll the dice, because I'm just not too sure. Even with Azzy Fudd coming back, we expect her to come back pretty soon. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think she might be back for the Louisville game because we
Okay.
expected her to be out
Yeah.
one
I
to
mean,
two
I'll
weeks.
be
So
honest with you now. I don't want to make any, you know, very early predictions, but it's the fact of the matter of, a coin toss. I'm not going to throw them out the window when it comes to March, but I think once they get matched up with, because you take a look at the schedule and you have Louisville. When is it? Louisville coming up?
yeah, the 18th
Yeah, I actually took it down from the screen, but you Louisville,
or
and then
19th, December 19th.
yeah, December 19th on a so next Sunday. So they get again that big break, but and then they face number one South Carolina again, I believe, in weeks ahead. So I think it's going to come down to that performance, and we'll just have to see how they do against these ranked ball clubs. Ryan, I'll cap it off right there. I'll just leave you with, again, any answers for, again, unranked UCLA. Visited stores today. They presented what could have been a huge problem, another loss, back-to-back losses, but UConn survived. When you talk about, I mean, that's like going from a lightweight to a heavyweight championship round. I mean, you're going from UCLA, an unranked school, all the way up the flip scripts, the script flips to Louisville. And again, they're number 8. They may rise even further by the time that they
Right.
see him. I just, how, if you're Gino, like, how do you how do you put together a good enough game plan to, again, because it's hard enough. They just barely hung on to UCLA, and now you have one of the top schools in the nation coming.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll be ready. It's a week full of film. They get to rest up, and hopefully they get AZ Fudd back. We'll have to look into that some more and see if she comes back for the Louisville game, because that would be huge to have her coming off the bench,
Mhm.
especially with Paige Beckers out. But yeah, I mean, I think they'll be ready for the game. We've been previewing this game the whole entire time on our very first episode on this UConn Huskies team. The first game we highlighted was of course the South Carolina game, but then we saw Louisville, and they just kept rising and rising in the rankings. They're all the way up to 7 now. So yeah, it's definitely going to be a close game. I think it's going to come down to yet another fourth quarter game for UConn, and I think the main question is, and I think it's been this question almost for every single game they have, is whether they can finish strong or not going into the fourth quarter, and
Yeah.
whether they're going to play against the suffocating defense, or can they be the suffocating defense and create turnovers, get the offensive rebounds, defensive rebounds, get those second chance points, and really outplay their opponent in the fourth quarter. I think it's going to come down to that.
That's it. You said it. I couldn't have said it any better. Again, next they have Louisville coming in. What is that? Sunday, December the 19th. And I believe that game will air on ESPN. And the very talented Haley Van Leith, the sophomore guard for Louisville. She stands at 5'7". Very talented Van Leith, and the Louisville Ball Club coming in to play Connecticut in about 1 week. It should be fun, Ryan. Ryan, enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you in about 1 week.